Morning, it's 9:30 on Wednesday, the 22nd of November. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
So, back on track. That is how the Chancellor will be describing the economy in the autumn statement at 12:30 p.m. We're going to be building up to that.
And tax-cutting Tories, the Tories are saying that they're the biggest business tax cuts in 50 years. Both national insurance and business tax will be reduced. It's all about trying to get economic growth.
Chin Chin, Jeremy Hunt will freeze duty on alcohol and help pubs. We're going to have experts on hand to preview what it all means and what it will mean for the money in your bank account.
And the terrible tragedy in Snowdonia. Police searching for the group of missing teenagers recovered the 4 boys' bodies from a crashed car in North Wales. Our reporter Theo Chicomba is in Wales.
I love the latest from Garreg, where North Wales police confirmed that 4 bodies were found after an extensive search here in North Wales.
Really awful story there. Plus the Israeli hostage situation, the clock is ticking. There we've got COVID inquiry and, of course, I'm a Celebrity, get me out of here.
Yeah.
And Nigel Farage. It's a great news day. Don't go anywhere. We've got a lot to get through. gbviews@gbnews.com is the email address, as always. First, though, here's your very latest news with Ray.
Very good morning to you. It's just after 9:30. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB Newsroom. Israel's published a list of 300 Palestinians who could be released as part of a deal agreed with the Hamas terror group. It was posted by Israel's Department of Justice and includes the name, age and offence of each prisoner. In a statement, Israel said it will release at least 150 Palestinians in exchange for 50 hostages held by Hamas. The start of the 4-day pause that's been agreed is expected to be announced in the next 24 hours. However, the release of every additional 10 hostages will extend the pause in fighting by a day. The Palestinian President, Mahmoud Abbas, has welcomed the temporary break in fighting and has reiterated calls for wider solutions to the conflict. World leaders have also welcomed the news. The US President Joe Biden said it would see American hostages freed. The European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has promised the bloc will do its utmost to use the time for a humanitarian surge of aid into Gaza. Meanwhile, in Russia, a spokesperson for the Foreign Ministry said Moscow also welcomes the humanitarian pause. A community in Shropshire is mourning the deaths of 4 teenage boys in North Wales. Jevon Hurst, Harvey Owen, Wilf Henderson and Hugo Morris had set off on a camping trip in the Snowdonia area. Their bodies were recovered yesterday after a car was found overturned and partially submerged in water. North Wales Police is investigating how the car left the road. The force says it appears to have been a tragic accident. And tax cuts, investment in the energy sector and getting people back into work are among the measures expected to be announced by the Chancellor later. Jeremy Hunt's autumn statement will pitch Britain's economy as being back on track as he seeks to ease the tax burden from a 70-year high. And we'll have more on all those stories in our news programmes throughout the day. More right now on our website, gbnews.com. Now it's back to Andrew and Bev.
Very good morning. It's 9:33. We're opening with some really sad news this morning. The 4 teenagers who disappeared on a weekend camping trip in Snowdonia in Wales have been found dead after their car was discovered submerged in a river.
Jevon Hurst, Harvey Owen, Will Henderson and Hugo Morris, they vanished on that trip to the Welsh mountains. They went camping. One of them didn't even tell his mum where he was going. She thought he was staying with his grandfather. Police confirmed their car left the road in Garreg, which is where the bodies were recovered. The police say it appears to have been a tragic accident. All 4 boys were students at Shrewsbury College and they were doing their A-levels.
That's right. The college have said we would like to offer our deepest condolences to the family and friends of the 4 young men who tragically died in the suspected traffic incident. This news is truly heartbreaking and our thoughts go out to those affected by this tragic news.
They go on to say we'll be working directly with students and staff who are affected by this terrible accident and have put in place a range of support measures for all of our community. It's terrible. It's
really awful. And, you know, there but for the grace of God go any parents of teenage boys. My eldest just turned 20 recently, and you can do what you can to stop them making silly decisions in your absence, but there's only so much you can do. And in fact, there was a very similar accident to this at my son's school just a few years ago. None of the boys lost their lives, but there were some very serious and life-changing injuries in it. And these kind of incidents affect the whole community, because then the families often will blame the others, and of course you have the anger. Why was your son driving too fast? But your son didn't have a seatbelt on, but your son had a drink. We all know your boy is the one who is he's the trouble causer. He wouldn't have done it without your influence. The reverberations are horrific.
But they're boys, they're teenagers, and they went camping. That's what boys should be doing, shouldn't they? I mean, obviously the wrong time. The weather was terrible. And if they had confided in the parents would probably say, you ain't going.
I know.
Which is why they didn't tell them.
No, they didn't tell them. And how you ever get rid of that anger in your heart that as a mother and a parent you must be thinking, you idiot, if you'd just listened to me, if you'd just done what you know you should have done, you would still be here. There will be siblings affected. There will be grandparents, aunties and uncles. As I say, the tragedy of these sorts of events when you've got 4 young boys, and it is relatively common. The most dangerous situation you can put a group of teenage boys into is to be behind the wheel of a car, inexperienced drivers,
probably not long past their driving test.
So really, really sad story to open.
Certainly is. In fact, later, of course, today, the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, he's going to set out the government's plans for tax and spending. It's in the autumn statement. National insurance, we're being told, will be cut. Duty on alcohol will be frozen.
That's right. It was announced last night that the national living wage will increase by almost 10%. More than 2 million full-time workers are set to benefit from a pay rise of more than £1,800 a year.
And they also tell us, of course, they're going to make some of these people who are on benefits get back into work. They have to take a job working from home if necessary, or they may cut their benefits. I don't believe a word of it. Richard Tice is here, who is a regular here, of course, and he's the leader of Reform UK. Richard, we've heard all this before about getting the work shy back into work.
Well, hang on, Andrew. Very good morning.
Morning.
The reality is, a week ago, we were being told there was no room for tax cuts.
That's true.
And then the reality is they saw Reform UK go up in the polls, 4 double-digit polls for the first time. P for panic has descended into Downing Street. All of a sudden, they've found tens of billions behind the sofa. Where's that come from, I wonder? All of a sudden, it's all about tax cuts here, business tax cuts there. I've been talking about this for years. So I'm delighted they're listening to me, but I frankly think it's cynical, pre-election gambling, essentially. That's what they're doing. Whether or not any of it actually comes out. I've been talking for 18 months about the over 5 million people on out-of-work benefits to get those back into work. So, I think the Chancellor and the Prime Minister, they've been listening to me, what we've been saying at Reform. The question is, when will any of this actually happen? People want action now, not in a couple of years' time.
That's the point. And none of this is happening till April at the earliest. So we're going to have all this huffing and puffing today and nothing till April. So how does that kickstart the economy? How does that kickstart small businesses?
Here's the biggest laugh of it. Apparently, the Chancellor is going to stand up and say with a straight face that the Conservatives are not the party of, they're going to reject big government, high spending and high tax. Are they having us all on, for heaven's sake? I mean, that's exactly what they've done for the last 5 years plus.
Highest tax
We've
burden.
got the highest tax burden, the biggest government, the greatest level of waste, the highest level of government spending. Here's the thing. I don't think they're going to talk about cutting government spending at all. Apparently there's going to be benefits are going to be increased by about just under 7%. Remember, that is a post-tax number. So for someone who's in work, that's the equivalent of an extra 20% plus. So that's well over 8% increase for those on benefit. That's not exactly an incentive to get you off your backside and back into work.
And inflation has been cut to 4.6%. Credit where it's due. They've got it down quite sharply. So
energy prices got that down, not them.
Yeah, but why are they not raising it in line with inflation? Why are they giving it 6.7%? They're going to raise benefits by 7%.
It's inexplicable. You can't encourage people back into work if you're going to actually dramatically increase the amount that they're going to be paid on a net post-tax basis. It makes no sense whatsoever. I just think the whole thing is complete and utter panic as they collapse in the polls.
What would you do, Richard? What would Reform do to make sure that most people had more money in our pockets?
There's one very simple thing, and this idea of increasing the minimum wage sounds great on paper, but remember, they're all going to be taxed on that. What you should do is you should lift the starting point at which you pay any income tax from 12.5 grand that this government has frozen for years and wants to freeze for many more years, keep an eye on that, from that to 20,000 a year. That transforms the whole landscape for everybody on low incomes. All of us, that's 30 quid a week. That's real cash to help pay for...
That's more left-wing than Jeremy Corbyn.
No, it's not.
It is.
No, it's not. It's exactly the opposite. What's happened to you, Piers, for heaven's sake? Honestly, that's encouraging people to have their own money in their own pocket that they can then make the choices how they spend it.
And if you think about...
That's a sensible thing to do.
And if you think about who would be affected by that, I'm sure we can all think of people in our life who might be just working part-time, who don't earn a huge amount because they just want a job on the side, or, you know, or young people, actually. Something about my son who is earning less than £20,000 a year and then sees his payslip and he can't believe he's paying how little he gets at the end of the month because he's paying tax. That'll make a big difference for him.
Massive. It will free up 6 million people. Yeah, and me. It'll free up over 6 million people from paying any income tax whatsoever. That's transformational, absolutely transformational.
Yeah.
And you get the revenue back because they're earning.
Because what happens is they earn it, they spend it, so it reverberates around the economy. All the way through. You get a huge, what they call a multiplier effect of like sort of 60%.
What if they do that, Richard, and nick your idea?
Oh, look, I'm about what's right for the country. I'll be delighted. I'll be singing from the rooftops. They're listening to me once again. They're doing what I said. But if people want actually to trust, you've got to trust people who spot this stuff early and get it done early, not sort of reactively like this bunch.
What about high earners? What would reform do with their tax situation?
So when we get some growth in the economy, likewise, you've got to lift the tax threshold for high earners, which has been frozen at around about the £50,000 mark. So many people, particularly people in some of the public sector, whether it's nurses, whether it's doctors, teachers, have been, all of a sudden they thought, hang on, how can I be a high rate taxpayer? I don't feel it. So you've got to lift that threshold. This is the government that has frozen those tax thresholds, and therefore it's like a hidden stealth tax round the back door. They haven't been honest enough to do it in the front door.
If they'd uprated those allowances, Richard, you'd be kicking the 40p tax would be kicking in when you're earning more like £77,000 a year.
Absolutely right. And we've been talking this for a very long time indeed. And this idea they're going to sort of give a huge tax cut to businesses, what they call allow full expensing, look, that can be useful. But the truth is that's only really going to help big business. It's not going to help small, medium-sized businesses.
I know. What about business rates? That's what
taking
they want.
Huge risks.
Don't they need to set up on business rates, don't
business
they?
rates and corporation tax.
And do something to help the high street. So business rates of buildings and
I've been banging on for a couple of years that you should scrap all business rates on the high street for small and medium-sized businesses and have a small delivery tax on the big delivery companies, the Amazons, the eBays, the big logistics firms, 2 or 3%. All of a sudden, you're starting to try to level the playing field a bit. Not easy, but money talks. You've got to do something, otherwise our high streets are collapsing everywhere, and all you're seeing, frankly, is barber shops and candy shops.
And tattoo parlours.
But George Osborne talked about doing that when he was Chancellor, so did Sunak. Why don't they do it? Why are they scared of companies like Amazon?
Why do you think?
Because they think they're going to clear off and go somewhere else?
Oh, either that, or is it maybe possibly big donations into the parties? I mean, these political parties...
Because it would be such a vote winner.
Well, of course it would. Maybe that's why they're not doing it. They need the cash. I don't know. But it's just common sense, and there seems to be a lack of that at the moment. So, yeah, I think this stuff is really important because we've got to get some growth back into the economy. Focus on those growth numbers. The economy is absolutely flatlining. The OBR might be saying that it might sort of drift into recession next year. Every risk of that. The only blessing, frankly, is that we're doing better than our colleagues across the Channel, where the Eurozone's basically in recession and heading south. You've got to cut taxes and you've got to cut spending. Listen to whether or not he talks about cutting any spending. I doubt it.
Before we let you go, David Cameron made his maiden speech in the Lords today. Lord Cameron, yes, we tap our forelock, and he talked about the advantages of the new Trans-Pacific deal that's been struck. He did manage not to mention Brexit or the fact this deal has only been done because
it's even worse than that.
Union.
I've already heard that he's instructed his civil servants to get closer to their counterparts in Brussels, particularly as I touched on last night, with regard to defence cooperation amongst with the sort of the command and control centre. So I'm very, very watchful of what's going on there. I think Cameron is not good news for this country.
I quite agree with you.
Right, let's carry on looking forward to this autumn statement. Thank you, Richard. Don't go anywhere. We're joined by founder of Money Magpie, Jasmine Birtles. Jasmine, great to see you. Lovely to see you. Is this enough we're going to be getting from Jeremy Hunt today to restore faith in the Conservatives of being the party of the pound?
Well, I hope so. I mean, like Richard Tice, I very much think that we should whack up the basic amount that you can earn until you pay tax. So at the moment, as we said, it's £12,500. I agree. £18,000, £20,000, I think, should be the time where you start to pay tax. Also, businesses are needing to hear some good news from the Chancellor. As you've mentioned, Beverly, there's a big problem on the high street. And what I'm hearing from small businesses particularly is that they want to have the VAT threshold massively increased. So, yeah, I would like to see help for businesses, particularly small businesses, and I would like to see some serious tax cuts. Because, as Richard mentioned, we are staring down the barrel of a recession. And I think it's more important to consider that than it is to consider inflation at this stage.
Jasmine, when you talk about VAT, when you say the threshold being raised, you mean at the point at which your revenue and your income is such in your business that you pay VAT. But what about the VAT that we are charged on meals in restaurants, that kind of thing? Because that makes a huge impact on your bill and is therefore affecting the hospitality industry.
Absolutely, yes. I mean, frankly, I'd like to see that cut. As you say, at the moment, we're paying 20%, sales tax. VAT is sales tax. If that were brought down to 17.5, which is what it was for a while, then that would make a big difference to how much we can spend. It would definitely, I think, kickstart the economy. And, you know, the paradoxical about cutting taxes, particularly income tax, is that the government tends to have a higher tax take. Because when, as you said, that when people earn more, when they're allowed to keep more of the money they've earned, tend to work with more of a will. And we do have a really big problem with productivity in this country. So anything that would make us work more productively, work more, is, in my view, a good thing and will actually bring more money into the coffers.
How difficult is it still out there, Yasmin, in the cost of living crisis for the average family? It's still very difficult, isn't life at the moment?
Yes, it really is. I mean, if you had your gas and electricity bill recently, you'll have thought, what the heck? We were supposed to be seeing lower amounts, but actually it's higher. So we've got that problem. Petrol is very expensive. Food is still very expensive. So yeah, are suffering, definitely.
They're going to freeze alcohol duty, which gets them a cheap headline in the Sun and Daily Mirror. But that's not going to do much for pubs, which are closing, I think, at the rate of 100 a month.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And there again, the VAT is an issue for them. And certainly, I mean, they're not going to be too pleased with the rise in the basic rate in the lowest paid. Of course, I mean, I'm personally pro that, even though I am an employer myself, but I am in favour of increasing the minimum wage, the living wage. I think it's more something that businesses need to pay rather than government. Because in the past, when you had very low minimum wages, the government had to step in and help with various benefits, tax cuts, etc., and tax credits, etc. But I think it is better actually for businesses to pay. I mean, that's the idea of working. You should be able to work and be able to pay for things. But some businesses like, as you say, pubs, high street shops, small businesses, the higher minimum wage is going to be an issue for them. And so I would like to see that they're going to get help with VAT, taxes, other aspects of running a small business.
Jasmine, do you hear anything from the Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, that makes you think that Labour would offer any better business landscape for small business owners?
Sadly, no. And it's a weird thing. And it doesn't seem to me that Labour likes small businesses. It seems to like civil service and very big businesses. They seem quite happy with the Amazons, etc. I don't know why it is, because they should be pro small businesses. Frankly, any government, any party should be pro small businesses, because small businesses are the backbone of British economy. You know, we make up. I say we. I'm a small business as well. We make up about 90% of the economy. Well, I say the economy of the employment in this country. So really, small businesses should be put up on a pinnacle by any party, any government. They should be doing everything they can to support small business and make it more possible for them to make a profit.
Quite right.
OK, thank you, Jasmine. Jasmine Birtles there from Money Magpie.
Now, some awful news now. The camping trip that went horribly wrong. The 4 teenagers who disappeared on that trip to Snowdonia in Wales have been found dead after their car was discovered submerged in a river.
So joining us now is GBNews reporter Theo Chicumba, who is in Gareg, I believe it's pronounced. Good morning, Theo. It must be a terribly sombre mood there this morning. Have we had much reaction from the families and from the school that these boys all attended?
Yes, well, a very good morning to you both. You're absolutely right. It's been a sombre moment, not only for the families who are affected by this, but the community here. Around 400 people live in this area of Gareg in North Wales. Now, the police yesterday confirmed just after 4:30 in the late afternoon that 4 bodies were found following an extensive search of 4 teenagers who have travelled to this area over the weekend. And in the last couple of hours, we've heard from the mother, Crystal Owen, who's Harvey Owen's mother. She said, "I feel like I'm in a nightmare I wish I could wake up from, but I'm not." And she went on to say, "I just wanted to say I do appreciate people's kindness, but no amount of messages is going to help me overcome this. Nothing will make this nightmare go away." Now, she posted this on her business's Facebook page. She operates a cupcake shop over in Shrewsbury. And of course, as you can imagine, the other parents as well will be going through this difficult time following that confirmation yesterday. We've also heard from the Shrewsbury College that the young boys attended, and they have also passed on their condolences to the family. Now, of course, the community here is still coming to terms with what has happened. The road has reopened. There's no longer a police presence in this area, but officers do say the car appeared to have come off the road and onto the side, and the car was found following a tip-off yesterday from a local resident who lives in this area, and the car was found partially submerged in water. And just finally, police have said that they ask that the families of these boys are afforded privacy at this desperate time.
OK, thank you, Theo.
Chicumba.
Just a reaction from you, Richard. You've got teenagers now, or
actually, no, they're in their 20s. Yeah. I mean, this is everybody's worst nightmare. And I actually remember, with our children's mum, just those discussions about who can drive, when, with whom. You go through that, difficult judgments, youngsters keen to become adults, to get on,
part of
to
growing
go
up,
out,
isn't it?
part of growing up. And it's just utterly heartbreaking. And there's no rights or wrongs to it. It's I'm afraid to say, it's just the worst, most awful luck in the world.
Yeah, it really is.
Just appalling. Split-second judgments in the best intent, gone disastrously wrong.
Absolutely.
Very quickly, we've only got 30 seconds. How do you think Nigel Farage is doing?
Oh, isn't he doing brilliantly? Absolutely. I mean, he's revealing everything. Absolutely marvellous.
Literally everything.
Well,
did we expect to see his backside quite so soon?
Look, I think the reality is that people are seeing the true Nigel in every sense of the word, and I think from everything I'm hearing, people like what they see.
Let's hope so. Well. All right, thank you so much, Richard. Right, we're going to be discussing the COVID inquiry, what was said yesterday, what might be said today. This is Britain's Newsroom.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update with me, Annie, from the Met Office. It'll be a cloudier day for many of us. There'll be some rain in the north, but there'll still be some sunshine on offer across southern areas. So we've got off to a slightly cloudier, damper start across parts of Scotland, northern England as well. That rain will persist, particularly in the north, but it will dry up across the Pennines. We'll also see plenty of dry weather across the bulk of England and Wales. Some sunshine developing by this afternoon once again. So a similar feel to yesterday. today by later on this afternoon, highs of around 12 degrees. It'll also be as high as around 14 degrees across eastern areas of Scotland, despite the rain and cloud here. Then through this evening, it stays fairly cloudy across the board. The rain will start to pep up, though, across the far north of Scotland as that front starts to finally make its progress southwards. So particularly across the Shetland Isles, it's going to turn quite blustery and wintry up there. Across the south, though, staying cloudy, a little bit murkier than last night, with only lows of around 11 degrees for some towns and cities down here. So a milder start tomorrow. And the rain will then shift throughout Thursday further south, with that colder air becoming more widespread as we head into Friday from the north. So we've got some wintry showers starting to fall across the hills of Scotland, and we could see some overnight frosts over the weekend in southern areas. But on Thursday, highs will be around average of 12 degrees.
Thanks, Annie. Still to come, Israel and Hamas have agreed to a 4-day truce which will see the release of 50 women and children held captive in Gaza in exchange for 150 Palestinian women and children held in Israeli jails. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with Newsroom.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
10 o'clock on Wednesday, the 22nd of November. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Bev Turner, and Andrew Pearce.
Well, back on track, that's what the Chancellor will how the Chancellor will describe the economy in the autumn statement, which starts around 12:30 p.m. Our political editor, Chris Hope, is in Downing Street.
I'm in Downing Street, where the Cabinet has signed off the autumn statement. They're very happy with when they left, but what's to come, we'll wait and see.
We're at a coffee shop in Stockport where we'll be waiting to see exactly how the autumn statement will be affecting families here.
How the Chief Medical Officer, Professor Chris Whitty, described the government's intervention during the initial coronavirus outbreak. Not everybody agrees.
And the risk of going too late, in which case you get all the problems of the pandemic running away. My view is, with the benefit of hindsight, we went a bit too late on the first wave.
You know, we're going to be talking to Molly Kingsley about the COVID inquiry. Jonathan Van Tam is there today. There was a very interesting exchange between Chris Whitty and Hugo Keith about risk assessment, absolute risk versus relative risk. We're going to be explaining why that was so significant. Let us know your thoughts this morning, gbviews@gbnews.com. And I think Theo Chicumba, our reporter down in Wales, is going to be bringing us the latest from the village there, learning of the death of those 4 poor teenage boys and their families grieving this morning. gbviews@gbnews.com is the email address. First, though, here's your very latest news with Aaron Armstrong.
Very good morning to you. It's just after 10 o'clock. Aaron Armstrong in the GB Newsroom. Israel has published a list of 300 Palestinians who could be released as part of a deal with the Hamas terror group. It includes the name, age and offence of each prisoner. In a statement, Israel said it will release at least 150 Palestinians in exchange for 50 hostages held by Hamas. After the two sides agreed a 4-day pause, it's expected to start in the next 24 hours. However, the release of every additional 10 hostages will extend the pause by a day. The Palestinian President, Mahmoud Abbas, has welcomed the temporary break in fighting and has reiterated calls for wider solutions to the conflict. And world leaders have also praised the deal. The US President Joe Biden said it should see further American hostages freed. The European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has promised the bloc will do its utmost to use the time for a humanitarian surge of aid into Gaza. Meanwhile, in Russia, a spokesperson for the Foreign Ministry said Moscow also welcomes the humanitarian pause. The hometown of 4 teenage boys who died in North Wales has cancelled tonight's switching on of the Christmas lights out of respect for the families. Jevon Hurst, Harvey Owen, Wilf Fitchett and Hugo Morris had set off on a camping trip in the Snowdonia area. Their bodies were recovered yesterday after a car was found overturned and partially submerged in water. North Wales Police is investigating how the car left the road. The force says it appears to have been a tragic accident. Shrewsbury Town Council have called it a terrible tragedy. Tax cuts, investment in the energy sector and getting people back into work are among the measures expected to be announced by the Chancellor later. Jeremy Hunt's autumn statement will pitch Britain's economy as being back on track as he seeks to ease the tax burden from a 70-year high. Chair of the Commons Treasury Committee, Harriet Baldwin, says the statement is about getting Britain moving.
Well, I think it is going to be a real turning point today in terms of the autumn statement, because if you cast your mind back to a year ago, inflation was running over 11%. Now we've got a backdrop of it having fallen to 4.6%, and the Bank of England forecasting that it will fall further next year. And so that's a backdrop where Jeremy Hunt, who had to raise taxes last year, can look actually at giving some of that back to the hard-working people of the UK.
However, the Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Darren Jones, says today's announcement won't be enough to change Britain's economic tide.
On every measure on the economic dashboard for our country, whether inflation and the cost of living, the amount of tax people are paying, the amount of debt the country's in, the quality of our public services, and whether people at home feel better off after the last 13 years under the Tories or not, it's just red lights across the dashboard. It's 13 years of failure, and the budget today is not going to be able to do anywhere near enough to turn that around.
4 men will be sentenced later for the murder of a 28-year-old woman in Liverpool. Ashley Dale was killed when James Witham forced his way into her home and opened fire with a machine gun. He and co-defendants Joseph Peers, Niall Barry and Sean Zeiss were found guilty of murder and conspiracy to murder Ms Dale's partner. Witham told the jury he believed the house was empty at the time and he'd intended to send a warning to Ms Dale's partner, who he'd claimed was stealing drug customers. The co-founder of the tech company OpenAI has returned its CEO just days after he was ousted in a bizarre turnaround. Sam Altman lost his position on Friday after the company's board said he hadn't been candid with them. His departure triggered an open letter from 500 members of staff who threatened to resign unless he was reinstated. He quickly accepted a new position with Microsoft, who have a partnership with OpenAI, and he'll now return to his previous role as part of an agreement in principle. And around a third of Brits have admitted to working in their pyjamas. A survey from Indeed found around 33% of workers do wear pyjamas during shift hours. Employees dress in their nightwear 46 days a year on average, with 1 in 12 wearing pyjamas every day. And nearly half of the bosses surveyed said staff have become too casual since the pandemic, which they blame on too much working from home. So if you're in your pyjamas now, go on, get changed. That's it for me for the moment. Now it is back to Andrew and Bev.
I don't wear pyjamas, ever.
What do you wear?
Nothing.
Oh, I feel like I've just got to know you a lot better, Andrew.
Don't most people not wear pyjamas? Do you wear pyjamas?
OK, I normally wear nothing, but I have a lovely fleecy, a Winceyette nightie that I bought from TK Maxx, which my boyfriend cannot bear. And so when he's away, it is, when he's away, I get into my fleecy Winceyette nightie. It's my favourite nightwear.
There we are, you see.
I wish you hadn't asked.
We're going to get lots of messages now about
ladies
Winceyette nightie.
Now then, what have you been saying at home? If the government and the civil service cut their massive spending, then there would be a lot more money in the coffers, says Peter.
And Bob says, why is VAT still 20%? It started at 15%, then up to 17.5%, now 20%. It should be reduced now. But it won't be, Bob, because they'll say that's inflationary. And it would also put more money in your pocket.
Yeah, and we're going to be talking to Adam Brooks, the pub landlord. You'll know him from Prime Time on GB News. I've heard him talking really strongly about this. We're going to be talking a bit later about how pubs and restaurants need that VAT to come off, because you know what it's like. You get your bill at the moment when you go out to eat or drink.
And then there's 20% on top.
And it's eye-watering.
And then if there's service as well.
Honestly, it's awful. What's Nick been saying? If the tax threshold were increased to £20,000, this is Reform's policy, I would immediately go back to working 3 days a week for my current 2. One of the reasons I reduced my working hours was to get closer to the current tax threshold of £12,500. It just wasn't worth working any more than due to the tax.
And they've been wrestling with this dilemma for years about how to get people back into work, because benefits, for some families, it's more advantageous financially to stay on benefits, which is crazy.
It never should be more advantageous to not work than work.
And there's, is it 5 million people on benefits? It's crazy. It's crazy.
Why? Because working is good for you. It makes you feel good. It gives you a purpose, doesn't it? I know we're lucky. We have a cushy job.
Yeah, yeah.
But actually just getting up and having a purpose in the morning has been just proven to improve health and mental well-being as well.
And this is what Ian Duncan Smith's think tank's been working on for years.
CSJ,
because, you know, some families that have never worked. Well, we're going to get the autumn statement at about 12:30. We know that we're pretty certain national insurance will be cut. Let's talk to our political editor, Chris Hope, who is in Downing Street. Hi, Chris.
Andrew, morning. Hello, yes, in about 20 minutes' time, the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, will emerge from the door behind me in 11 Downing Street. And with we saw earlier the Cabinet signing off on the autumn statement. Lots of smiles as they left. I was asking them, is it time for tax cuts for Brits and for GB News viewers? And I got grins from all of them, really. Even Alistair Jack, the Scottish Secretary, a friend of Boris Johnson, said to me, just wait and be patient. So I think we are going to see some tax cuts in terms of cuts in national insurance, probably 1p maybe off that. That's reversing, actually, don't forget, an increase in national insurance brought in by George Osborne in 2011, bringing it back to where it was under the Labour government, where back in the noughties. Elsewhere, we'll see maybe 100 measures to boost growth. We're going to see full expensing for businesses to weigh off their tax bills against investment. That'll help manufacturers. So I think it's going to be quite a boosterish autumn statement. Is Trustonomics back? Well, what the difference here is the OBR, the Office for Budget Responsibility, is saying there is headroom for limited tax cuts, and that's given Mr Hunt and Mr Sunak the opportunity to try and show their Tory tax-cutting core, which so far has been absent for the past year.
The issue with the days like this, Chris, for governments is not only laying out the policy, but how that is communicated to the public in a positive way and how it lands with the public in a positive way. They're pushing water uphill at the moment, the Conservatives. I don't have an awful lot of faith that this is going to be received positively on the front pages tomorrow, do you?
Well, I think it might do, Bev. I think if they take off 1p off national insurance, that is a big cost to the Exchequer, £5 billion less in tax going to the Exchequer, more into our viewers' pockets. So that is these are small numbers, don't forget, because the big issue is they've kept these tax thresholds unchanged so far. We've seen nurses, middle managers, doctors, people who shouldn't really be paying the higher rate of tax, paying the higher rate of tax, and that's what is crippling because of inflation has pushed many people into that tax bracket as pay has gone up. So we'll wait and see. They are hoping that it can shift the dial. They've got to do something, the Tory party, as you suggest. They're 20 points behind in the polls. They have been ever since Rishi Sunak was appointed Prime Minister by his own MPs just over a year ago. They've got to do something to move that dial, and so far nothing has worked, and we're approaching the general election. So this really feels to me like the last throw of the dice for the Tory party, trying to get back on terms with Labour.
All right, that's Chris Hope in Downing Street, and he'll keep us posted as the day progresses. We're joined now by David Mellor, well known to this programme, former Chief Secretary to the Treasury. David, morning to you. You've been in this position many times. Is there anything now the Conservatives can do this late in the political cycle to transform their electoral position? They are so far behind in the polls, and the Tory conference didn't change anything, the King's speech didn't change anything. Can this do it?
But I believe in the power of prayer. I think the power of prayer is what this government needs.
That's desperate.
I find it... no, I mean, this is a positive thought, the power of prayer. What isn't very positive are the facts. The trouble with this government is that it has not delivered on fundamental Tory principles, which involve, of course, cutting public expenditure, making savings on the way in which the country is run, and then handing the benefit of those savings back to the public, effectively by giving them a chance to share the fruits of the government's efficiency. Well, what efficiency? I mean, look, it gives me no pleasure knocking this government, but it's hard to know what else you can do. I mean, when I was Chief Secretary, this was coincidental, but I'm going to take the benefit of it. We were able to put the amount of money that the percentage of national wealth that was taken by the state to the lowest ever level. It's gone back up by 10 points since that time. And this government has pushed up tax more than any other government, Labour or Conservative. Now, this makes the task of this government very difficult because, of course, in the old days, I'm not going to say the good old days, I'll leave you to make your mind up whether they were good old days or not. People could say high tax, Labour, bad. Low tax, Tory, good. And that was, the art of politics, surely, is to whistle a tune that the public can hum. What can the public hum about this when tax is at the highest level it has been for 70 years? This is a shameful record. Now, who knows what the Labour Party would do? Who knows, all these skilled people in the Conservative Central Office will be persuading people that however bad this government has been, the Labour Party would be worse. But I think it's a very, very, very bad outlook for the government because, I was a barrister once and, you did your best with the case that you've got. But I think I'd have wanted a very large brief fee to defend this government about its economic efficiency and effectiveness, because it has been dismal for most of the time, and most of the outcomes are worse than any Tory government has achieved in many decades.
I'm going to ask you about that, David. So we've got record levels of taxation, we've got record levels of public spending, and if you ask most people, they will say services are terrible. We're not even getting any return on this huge public spending. Nothing seems to work, is a phrase you hear from so many people.
Yes, I'm afraid that is true, because it's not just a question of how much money they spend, it's a question of what they do with it. I hate myself sitting here, and God hasn't been too bad for me, so I could say, well, you've done all right, mate. But the reality is, I do not believe that I think if Mrs. Thatcher were to return, heaven knows what she'd do to her hairdo. I could see her ripping it out at the roots, because this is not a government that is a Thatcherite government at all. And it needs to be a Thatcherite government to be effective. But then you've got the problem, Rishi Sunak, bless his heart, is a gifted man, but very, very inexperienced. And Jeremy Hunt, we're about to see wandering through that door. I'm sure he knows the way out, at least hope he does. And basically, Jeremy Hunt has never, ever spent a moment in the Treasury except when he became Chancellor. You've got to sort of hope that God is being good to him, because you can't see his experience getting him through all of this.
OK, thank you, David. David Miller there. Now, with us in the studio is GB News economics editor Liam Hallager, and just the person I want to see on a day like this.
You know how to make a man feel good, Bev.
Honestly, I look into your eyes and I know it's all going to be OK.
In her Wincy at 90.
Is it all... Can we drop my Wincy at 90? Is it all...
Have you seen her in her rollers?
Is it all going to be OK, Liam, after today? Is it going to be OK? Can you behave yourself?
Jean Alexander, what an actor she was.
Listen,
wasn't she amazing?
We've got a government who is sort of measuring up, kind of balancing electoral benefits versus potential inflationary pressures. Is that fair to say? Because they're taking claim for this inflation going down. They can't really take credit.
They've done a massive reverse ferret, as we say in journalism. Yes. 3 weeks ago, it was irresponsible to talk about tax cuts. They were, quotes, impossible, said the Chancellor. Now, suddenly, they're nailed on, they're inevitable, they're the responsible thing to do. They're going full Liz Truss. Except that they're bringing the Office for Budget Responsibility with them, rather than thumbing their nose at the Office for Budget Responsibility.
Where is this new expression, financial headroom, from? This is the buzz phrase, Liam. What does it mean?
Reminds me of Max Headroom. Crikey, we're on a nostalgia.
From the 80s.
Look, financial headroom has been a phrase in economics since I did my A-level economics in the late 1980s. I'm older than I look. But in the end, Andrew, it's nonsense. All it means is that the OBR overestimated borrowing.
Yeah.
So now we've just borrowed more in October than pretty much any other October on record, but we didn't borrow quite as much as the massively pessimistic Office for Budget Responsibility said we would borrow. So it's not like we've got more money.
No.
It's just we're going to be a bit less in the hole than we thought we were going to be.
So it's a modelling error.
Yeah, it's a modelling error. It's a bit, Bev, cliche alert, OK? Don't at me. It's a bit like you see some shoes on sale, right?
Yeah.
and you think, crikey, those shoes were 400 quid, now they're only 300 quid. I've made £100.
Yes.
And then you put the shoes in the back of the wardrobe and you don't wear them, right? I mean, this is, it's mad housekeeping. Any household that ran its finances like this would be insolvent, and the kids wouldn't get fed because there'd be no
And is
money.
this going to kick into higher inflation again?
It could kick into higher inflation. It depends what tax cut they do. If they do a tax cut on business, that's unlikely to be inflationary, you know, extending full expensing so businesses can offset their investments partly against their corporation tax. If they do a national insurance cut, or they raise the threshold where national insurance or income tax starts, that affects 28 million people, including, you know, almost all low-income workers who instantly pretty much spend any extra money they get. So I can't see how that isn't inflationary. It might not lead to big inflation. It depends what happens with energy prices, all the rest of it. But it certainly will juice up demand in the economy. As will, by the way, this increase in the minimum wage.
Massive increase.
Massive increase in the minimum wage. Governments like announcing increases in the minimum wage because they can take credit, but business pays.
Yeah. Right, you've got a busy day ahead of you, Liam Hallager, so we're going to let you go for now. Thank you so much, though. Still to come this morning, the COVID inquiry. It feels like it's gone on and on. I think we've got another about 4 or 5 years of this, I believe, to go through. But will there be any trust left at the end of it? We're going to be talking to Molly Kingsley from Us For Them. She has been watching this in the most minute of detail. So this is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist. And you survived? I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like? I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three. Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
10:24, you're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
So Sir Chris Whitty, the Chief Medical Officer for England, is giving evidence at the UK COVID inquiry. Yesterday, he gave his perspective on the government response to the first COVID wave in 2020.
Was very aware that we essentially had two different things we were trying to balance. The risk of going too early, in which case you get all the damages from this with actually fairly minimal impact on the epidemic, and the risk of going too late, in which case you get all the problems of the pandemic running away. Now, as we will, I'm sure, come on to, my view is, with the benefit of hindsight, we went a bit too late on the first wave.
And yet he was the one who was worried about lockdown at all because he was worried about the impact on mental health and kids and schools.
He was, but not enough. Let's go now to the co-founder of Us For Them and co-author of Accountability Deficit, Molly Kingsley. Good morning, Molly. Where do you start with what we've seen in the last 2 or 3 days? Just go, because I know you've been watching this in the most minute detail. What stuck out for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, there's so many points, so I'll just pick off a few. I think, for me, actually, Whitty came across quite sensibly yesterday. I thought, I never thought I'd say this, but I had a lot of sympathy for him because I think he, unlike some others, particularly Valence, I would say the day before, he recognised that, I think he even said there are no good options and there are some really serious trade-offs to be made. And he seemed to have much more awareness of the devastation that lockdown, would cause and did cause. I think with that in mind, the inquiry KC's treatment of him was a bit brutal, actually. And, the inquiry KC, Hugo Keith, seems to have started from this perspective that COVID was an existential threat. And he said that. And he said that Whitty's failure to recognise COVID in those terms was a terrible flaw. And I think there's many of us that might challenge that because, as we've talked about many, many times, but I'm sure, COVID most definitely was a very serious illness for a minority of the population. But actually, had we had a predominantly healthy, fit population, then many of us might query whether it should have been termed an existential threat. So for me, actually, it was an illuminating day, predominantly because once again, it has underlined where the inquiry and the inquiry KC is starting from on this.
There was a particularly interesting moment, Molly, where Whitty pushed back on the concept of the precautionary principle and what that might mean. And just sum it up for us, because effectively...
Hi guys, you've just cut out.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear us? Hopefully you can still hear us, Molly. I was just going to ask Molly. We'll try and get her back. There was this moment where Hugo Keith, KC, was suggesting that any measure was better than no measure. And it basically effectively throwing out the idea of the cost-benefit analysis of lockdowns. What might the longer-term cost be to the economy? To excess deaths that we're seeing at the moment are enormous in this country, that are bigger than we've had for decades. We're back to Molly. I think we've lost Molly.
We've lost Molly completely.
And Whitty pushed back on the idea that the precautionary principle, he said, it doesn't mean that you just have to do something. Sometimes you also...
And that Casey's made his mind up already, because when Whitty said, some might say we didn't handle it perfectly, he said, that is an understatement.
Yeah.
So he's obviously decided we should have been locked down a lot sooner. He's decided. He's there to draw out questions and answers.
And be impartial.
Yeah.
And it's steering us towards The World Health Organization having control of our democracy and overtaking our democratic process. That's what worries me.
Now, moving on, Israel has agreed to a deal with Hamas to secure the release of 50 women and children kidnapped by the terrorists in exchange for a 4-day pause in the conflict. We're going to go straight to the defence editor at the Evening Standard, Robert Fox. Robert, morning to you. If you could explain the difference here between a pause and a ceasefire.
Well, sometimes I, like you and most of the audience, I'm pretty stuck on this one. There's a lot of messing around with language. I'm sure you and Bev would agree with about this. A ceasefire, a pause, a cessation of hostilities, a truce. Come on. Does the fighting stop? Does the fighting stop enough for a deal for the release of some 50 hostages go on? And we believe about 100, possibly 100 plus, detained, imprisoned, convicted. I don't know quite how they're going to categorize them. Palestinians go the other way. Will this allow aid into the south? And finally, what does Hamas do? And in answer to that question, I think that's where the devil is not in the detail. The devil is in the tail, where you will get the possibility of Hamas saying we're going to lose too much about it and probably aborting the whole deal.
You think that will happen?
Hello?
You think that will happen, Robert?
I think, and I think it's so fragile. And from this distance, it's very, very difficult to predict because there are so many policy paths in this. We have Mr. Netanyahu, we have his government, we have the Israeli Defense Forces, which seem to be generating their own policy, their own version of what they would like to happen. But what we're also looking at is very little sense of what the conclusion's going to be. What are you going to do with Gaza at the end of this?
Yeah. Robert, if I could ask you one other question. You will have heard Argentina's new president, who is apparently an admirer of Margaret Thatcher's economic policies, but he also is an admirer of the Falkland Islands, and he says they should be Argentinian. Well, that's not going to happen, of course. But, Robert, I wondered, would we be in a position now to send a task force to the South Atlantic to liberate the Falkland Islands in the way we did in 1982?
In answer to your very direct question, no. A task force in the way that we did it before, absolutely no. Nor is Argentina very well configured to actually go and smash in now. But that being said, we have been asleep at the wheel on securing the South Atlantic. And like you, as you imply in your question, I'm quite concerned about that. Things have been thinned out probably too much.
Let's hope that the new president of Argentina wasn't listening to that. Let's hope that he thinks we are capable of putting up a good defence. Were that...
well, I've just signed myself off GBNews forever, haven't I? Giving succor to the enemy. I do apologise.
Of course,
to everybody for that.
The islanders, of course, have made it absolutely clear, because there was that poll some years ago, Robert, I think it was 98.9% or 99% say they are British and they want to remain British.
Yes, the percentage, Andrew, showed that they really are part of the Latin American political culture, isn't it? Now, I know the islanders, and I've been back again recently, and I know them well, and that is the sentiment. And that's the bit that...
Sorry to interrupt you, Robert. We're looking at the live pictures now of the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, leaving Number 11, making his way to the House of Commons to make his awesome statement.
And the difference is when it's a budget, with the budget, he would be there with his budget briefcase, the famous battered red briefcase, and he would have all his Treasury ministers with him and Treasury officials. But here he's gone on his own, holding a folder, getting into his Range Rover. He could walk to the Commons, couldn't he?
He just had a little A4 green folder, like he'd just been down W.H. Smith's and bought it, didn't he?
And it wasn't exactly a dramatic moment, but, but let's hope the autumn statement is more dramatic than his departure from Number 11 Downing Street. So he's heading off early to the Commons. He will be taking his seat on the front bench next to the Prime Minister, because, of course, we get Prime Minister's questions first at 12 o'clock, which is a farce, really, because everybody wants to get on with the main action, which is Hunt rising to do the statement at 12:30.
Yeah.
Robert Fox, thank you so much for joining us, talking about that ceasefire, truce, pause in hostilities, and also about the Falkland Islands.
Yeah, right.
Keep their hands off the Falklands.
Lots more to come this morning. We're with you for another 90 minutes. First, though, here's Aaron with your news headlines.
It's 10:33. Aaron Armstrong here with the headlines from the GB Newsroom. Well, as you've been hearing, Israel has published a list of 300 Palestinians who could be released as part of a deal with the Hamas terror group. Israel says it will release at least 150 Palestinians in exchange for 50 hostages held by Hamas after the two sides agreed a 4-day pause. It's expected to start in the next 24 hours. The release of every additional 10 hostages will extend the pause by a day. Foreign Secretary David Cameron's described the agreement as a crucial step towards providing relief to the families of hostages and addressing the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. A Shropshire community is mourning the loss of 4 teenagers who died in North Wales. Jevon Hurst, Harvey Owen, Wilf Fitchett and Hugo Morris had set off on a camping trip in the Snowdonia area. Their bodies were recovered yesterday after a car was found overturned and partially submerged in water. The Chancellor has left Downing Street ahead of his autumn statement. Tax cuts, investment in the energy sector and getting people back into work are among the measures expected to be announced shortly. He is also expected to pitch Britain's economy as being back on track as he seeks to ease the tax burden from a 70-year high. 4 men will be sentenced later for the murder of a 28-year-old woman in Liverpool. Ashley Dale was killed when James Witham forced his way into her home and opened fire with a machine gun. He and co-defendants Joseph Peers, Niall Barry and Sean Zeiss were found guilty of murder and conspiracy to murder Ms Dale's partner. Pro-Palestinian activists have scaled a building in Manchester. Palestine Action posted a video on social media showing one of the protesters climbing onto the roof of the offices of Fisher German, a property management firm. The group said it's targeting the company due to its business dealings with weapons manufacturers. We'll be back with more in just under half an hour's time, or you can get more now on our website, gbnews.com.
For stunning gold and silver coins you'll always value, Rosland Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Quick look at the markets. The pound buys you $1.2528, €1.1493. Gold will cost £1,598 and 9 pence per ounce, and the FTSE 100 is at 7,473 points.
Rosland Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Imploding in the jungle.
Still to come. We're on the telly, stop whispering to me. We're going to be talking about I'm a Celebrity. You know they can hear you out there. That's how TV works.
Nella in the jungle, she imploded.
Oh, it was awful. If you didn't see it last night, you do not want to miss this. That woman did that on the first show and she fell off the cliff last night. I think she'll be out week 1 and we'll let you know how Nigel's getting on.
How does Nigel put up with her?
How does he put up with her? Yeah, how do I put up with you? That's the other question. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these 3.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
10:40 a.m. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
So the Chancellor will announce a cut in national insurance for millions of workers in his autumn statement later today. But what does it all mean for you? We're joined by our reporters Anna Riley in Hull and Sophie Reaper also this morning. Good morning, ladies. Anna Riley in Hull. Anna, where are you and what are people saying about this potential good news today?
Good morning. We are at the HU4 Community Trust in Hull. It's a food bank, it's a warm bank, and it's a hub for the whole community to get together. I'm joined by my lovely guests. I'm joined by Sherry, Linda and Chris. I'm just going to start with you, Sherry. You help local families that are struggling in the area access the food bank service here. Just tell me a little bit about what they're going through and if there are cuts to benefits in this Chancellor's announcement, what that will mean.
Already our families are struggling. The working families, I always say they're maybe just 50p over to get anything, any help from anywhere. When we first started working with HU4, as in the food bank, we maybe had about 5 parents come. Now we've seen many, many more. And if there's cuts to benefits, I honestly don't know what they're going to do. They're already in dire, they're embarrassed, and they're proud, and they don't want to ask for help. They will go without, and these are the people that we need to get to. Last year, Rishi gave the working people £67 a month. That really did help a lot of our parents. The workers are not seeing that. They've still got to pay for the childcare. Childcare is extortionate. And they're just struggling. If there's any more cuts, I honestly don't know how we're going to be able to support them. We already run out of food here at HU4 on occasions. And if there's many more families, I don't know how we're going to support them if they keep cutting like they are.
Thank you, Sherry. We'll just move on to you next, Linda. Linda, you're a pensioner. There might be some hope on the horizon for pensioners with the announcement. How are you feeling about it?
Well, I hope that there is, because I object to have paid tax on my pension when I was working. They say that, you know, your pension's like an allowance. It isn't. We paid the money in. So why should we be taxed on the pension now, instead of just having our pension that we've paid in? My son, he's a one-parent family, and he's struggling. I finish up helping him. What's going to happen if they take any more money off of us?
And Chris, you're a pensioner as well. Do you feel the same? What's your take on things?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I've got no high hopes at all, because if
goes to, like it does every year, they'll give it to us with one hand and then they'll take it back in the other. If my pension goes up, then my tax will go up. So where does that leave us? All people want is a living wage. They don't want to be on benefits. They want to be able to support themselves. And as one of the richest countries in the world, they're letting this country down. They really are. I mean, we've got asylum seekers, and I've got nothing against them. They're living in hotels. They're getting 3 meals a day. If you're in prison, you get 3 meals a day. But there are children out there whose parents are that are not getting 3 meals a day. Or else, if they get free school meals, and then there's a stigma across from that. It's just never ending.
Thank you for sharing, Chris. So that's the view here from HU4 Community Trust. Still feeling a little bit negative as to what's going to happen this afternoon, but certainly looking out for good news to see how this Chancellor's statement and budget can help people in this community and across the country.
Thanks very much. And we're going to go to Sophie now, who is in Stockport. Sophie Reaper. Morning, Sophie.
Very good morning to you both. Yes, I am indeed in Stockport this morning here at the Coffee Fix, which is a little bit of a community hub here in Gatley and Stockport. Now, of course, we are expecting the statement in the next couple of hours, and one of the big things that's going to be discussed, or has already been discussed, is the potential for taxes to be cut. So we're here today talking to members of the community and families about exactly how the autumn statement could help them. So joining us now is Laura. Very good morning to you, Laura. Talking now about taxes. If taxes were to be cut in the autumn statement, how is that going to be helping yourself but also families all over the country?
Yeah, so as a family, you know, we are so conscious now of the money that comes in, the money that goes out, what we're spending every single month. This is a conscious decision for us every single month, and I'm already very aware of my own privilege. I'm not having to make decisions between do I eat, do my kids eat, or do I pay my bills? And there are so many families that are having to make that decision every single day, and it's absolutely heartbreaking. So anything from a financial perspective that can help us to get more money back into our families to not just survive but thrive is beneficial.
Absolutely, and of course the cost of living is relative. There are some families, like you say, who'll be struggling with that, but everyday families, they'll also be struggling to balance their books now. I know we were speaking earlier about your work as a psychotherapist and what your clients have told them about the impact of this on their mental health. What could the statement be doing for people who are struggling in terms of their mental health?
Gosh, such a big question. So the thing is, at the moment, there are so many families in survival mode. You know, we need basic things to survive: food, water, sleep, and actually that is what a lot of families are doing, surviving. Nobody can thrive from that place. So a lot of people are just living day by day. Their mental health is suffering, and sadly their children's mental health is suffering. So the more that the government can be doing to better support families, this is going to help generations now and generations to come. This is really important. We need a more proactive approach to supporting families. At the minute, we're firefighting. Families are firefighting, the government's firefighting, and it isn't good enough for our well-being.
Well, let me just ask you then, do you think the statement will do enough to help these families who might be struggling, or do you not have much hope for the statement as it comes in the next couple of hours?
Oh, sadly, I do not have a lot of hope that actually this is going to help. I hope it will. I do have hope that it will, but I do think this is a bigger problem in terms of better supporting families and their well-being as a whole. Yes, financially, but we really need to be thinking about how we're better supporting families psychologically as well, in my eyes.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Laura. As you can hear here in Stockport, people are really taking stock of this autumn statement, and they're going to be watching keenly this afternoon to see what the government will be doing to help them.
All right, that's Sophie Reaper in Stockport. Of course, don't forget, we will be covering the autumn statement live here on GB News at 12:30. Well, we've got in the studio Stephen Pound chuntering away at the end, former Labour MP.
How dare you?
And Emma Webb is also with us.
It was a running commentary, not a chunter.
Yes, he did speculate that the scene in the cafe was the Liberal Democrat conference that we've just been watching there.
Very few people there and all very worthy.
Right, we have got this far without barely touching on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, but we love it, and we love the fact that Nigel's in there. So last night, if you didn't see it, there was a heated exchange between Nella Rose, she's the YouTuber, he did very well the night before, and Fred Siriax, he's from First Dates. Have a watch of this.
I could be your dad.
Pardon?
I could be your dad.
No, my dad was way older than you.
Yeah, but I could still be your dad.
You live on that side, I live on this side, and it's cool. Don't bring up my dead parent. Are you stupid about, oh, you know I could be your dad, right? You know my dad's dead. You're a weirdo.
I am
You're a weirdo.
sorry you took it.
Okay,
I'm
cool,
so sorry.
thank you.
Can I just say? First of all, I am sorry I've offended you.
Okay.
I am unaware that you felt offended. I am unaware that what I said, would lead to this conversation. I only said that in a way because I am older than you. I'm 51 and you're 26.
I'm not stupid.
Nella, it wasn't
You're not
like
gonna
that.
little girl me. You're not.
She fell from grace last night.
Really aggressive, Emma, did
It's
you
really
think?
quite marvellous watching somebody getting offended that somebody has infantilised them and doing so in a way that it was behaving like a sort of big baby.
Yeah.
She just made herself look like a bit of a tool, to be honest. So she embarrassed herself.
Yeah, and she was trying to bully him.
Well, it's also kind of delusional. Like, everybody knows, like, it's common sense. Everyone knows he just means that he's old enough to be her father. It's a completely unreasonable way to interpret his words. She's just behaving like an infant. She's behaving like a stroppy teenager.
The bit that was before that, because he was doing the cooking and he was saying he couldn't really see in the dark, and they were talking about eyesight, and that's why he said, I could be on the...
Listen, I've done a great deal in the course of my country. I've served my nation in many ways on many days. But watching the whole of that, I have to say, I wish I could have a brain scrub after that. Because I've often said to Emma, I'm old enough to be your grandfather.
Great-grandfather, Stephen, actually.
I am quite...
How dare you?
Yes, have a fight.
How dare you? We can't be friends anymore, Stephen.
But look, the point is, Fred, I have to say, he was a true gentleman.
He really was.
He was being... Listen, if I've offended you, I apologise.
He had no idea what he'd done.
But the point is, who knows that her father's dead, and who knows that the expression, I'm old enough to be your father, specifically talking about being a 51-year-old man, talking about having his eye surgery done. What could be more inoffensive than that? How on earth somebody can go flying off the handle and then say, I'm not going to sit next to you, how are you going to coexist? I can imagine Monsieur Farage sitting back and thinking, to be back in the GB News.
No, I can make Mr Farage thinking good, because she's
It's so self-centred, isn't it?
One contestant unravelling pretty quickly.
He's a good judge, Nigel.
So good. Do you think it was good telly? I thought it was sickening in many ways.
It was good TV. I mean, I sat there with my two daughters who are 14 and 12, and they loved Nella Rose until that last night, and I was obviously doing that mum thing of going, I can't believe she's saying that, I can't believe she's saying that, with the 12-year-old going, shush, mummy, stop giving a commentary. And then they both started chipping in going, I can't believe she's saying that. I can't believe it. She massively went down in their estimation. And she was the only one that they know on there because she's a YouTube star.
There'll be a lot of people like me who didn't know who on earth she was until you just told me she was a YouTuber, who will know nothing of her except this clip, which is going to be the one thing probably that she is remembered for.
And could cost her place in the jungle.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I have never watched this show at all, even though Nigel is on it. I'm sorry, I still can't bear to watch it.
You missed his naked bum.
I did, but I did see the body shaming clips, so I'm seeing the clips of it on social media.
You've seen the one where the snakes take one look at him and recoil.
I watched him eating the Grim pizza because everybody was tweeting that out. But I do think that it's the same thing with Matt Hancock, isn't it? That you get these people who go in, or they take part in shows like this, and it really can only go one way or the other for them. Either it cements a fantastic reputation because the public see that they're a good person, and I think that that's what's going to happen with Nigel, or the opposite happens and you get clips like this where you show yourself up, and people won't ever forget that.
The only thing that he did last night, which was a bit icky, was he was thinking that they couldn't...
icky?
They were thinking that he couldn't hear, and he said to one of the other contestants, I want to do the trials because then you get 25% of the airtime and I'm here to get a bigger audience. And so he sort of showed his hand a little bit. I mean, nothing wrong with that. Everyone's on there to get a bigger audience, but the speculation mentioned that he's in there to be... Well, it is a popularity contest.
I think he's been quite open about it, though, hasn't he?
So the illusion, don't they? But, I mean, the other thing is, I have to say, God love him, he's put a good deal out there, because not only can he have fag breaks in the middle of the jungle, but also he doesn't have to do any of the particularly difficult physical stuff, because after that dreadful plane crash...
Yeah, that's right.
And, of course, he then had a car crash before that.
Yeah.
So,
but he did have to eat some...
Yeah, doesn't that mean he's just going to have to eat all the disgusting things?
You know, I'm sorry, if you're trying to get a parliamentary seat and you're doing what we call the rubber chicken circuit, going round, you eat some stuff.
Yes, you certainly do. You certainly do.
All right, moving on. So pupils should be allowed to identify as the opposite sex only under strict new rules. Emma, is this a dose of common sense from Kemi Badenoch?
I think that this is being branded as a good news story when, in fact, it might actually backfire.
Oh, do you?
So Maya Forstater from the campaign group Sex Matters has pointed out, and I think quite rightly, that because and there are a lot of backbench MPs who are saying the same, because this, and I think Kemi has tried to make this as robust as possible. However, and the reason why it doesn't go for an all-out ban is because that would mean bringing in new legislation.
Yes.
But the problem is that because this isn't very, very straightforward, here is the line, schools will then be the ones who have to deal with the potential legal challenges. So there's a lot of leeway in here for activist parents, for troublesome students, for activist groups, to possibly bring legal challenges against schools because the line isn't very clearly drawn.
Right.
And as a result of that, it's putting too much responsibility on the schools. The guidance, I think, needs to be much clearer.
So do you think they should in fact legislate?
Yes, I think that. So the point that the backbench MPs have made is that essentially that if you don't go all the way, then you are causing more trouble, basically.
Right.
So anything less than a ban is not good enough.
Right.
So it's things like, Stephen, single-sex toilets, using a pronoun or having a gender-neutral uniform, if you like. Emma's saying it should be, the school should be protected in the law.
Well,
or is it still a little bit woolly?
You're so absolutely right. And I think the key phrase here is activist parents. And also, I have to say, I mean, I don't use the word woke very often, but I have to say some of the schools, dear Lord alive, I mean, they've got a master's degree in wokery. And you can just imagine each school being sort of, woker than the other one. Look, if I was a primary school kid and I just wanted to really wind up the teachers, I'd say, well, by the way, I'm identifying as Stephanie today.
Yeah.
But kids do that.
Yeah.
You actually need to have something in legislation which actually protects the parents, protects the school, but above all, protects the children.
And the thing is, they've had a year to get the legislation. They could have legislated, because this has been knocking around Whitehall for a year.
There are aspects of this that are good.
Parents have to be told.
And same-sex bathrooms, that kind of thing, that they actually have to uphold the Equality Act rather than what certain activist groups say the Equality Act entails.
Yeah.
So that is good, and they have tried to make it as robust as they can without legislating.
We need to go, Emma. We've got a statement this afternoon. We can't be late to that.
We'll be coming back to you on this.
Don't go anywhere.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquia, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 11 a.m. on Wednesday, the 22nd of November. This is Britain's News from GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
So Jeremy Hunt is set to deliver his autumn statement at around 12:30, with personal tax cuts anticipated. Are people going to feel the impact? Our reporter Jeff Moody is at a Christmas market in Exeter.
Yes, I'm here at the Christmas market in Exeter, where I'll be talking to stall holders and to customers to find out exactly what they want to hear from the Chancellor's autumn statement.
And Jack Carson, he's in Birmingham.
And I'm at a property developers in Birmingham, as of course this industry hopes the Chancellor's autumn statement could give them some good news to build on.
And booze on ice. Jeremy Hunt will soon put a freeze on alcohol duty in a bid to boost pubs. Some landlords think it's not enough. Putting a freeze on it, he's basically saying he's not going to put it up, but he's not taking it down, is he?
I noticed nothing about petrol.
No, nothing for the
on fuel.
motorist in there.
You'll
No.
have to wait to the budget for that, I suspect.
Yeah. Anyway, let us know your thoughts this morning. gbviews@gbnews.com is the email. First, though, here is your very latest news with Aaron Armstrong.
Very good morning to you. It's a minute past 11. I'm Aaron Armstrong. The Foreign Secretary says the truce between Israel and Hamas is a crucial step towards releasing hostages and providing humanitarian relief in Gaza. The two sides have agreed a 4-day pause, which is due to start in the next 24 hours. 50 hostages held by the terror group in Gaza will be freed in exchange for 150 Palestinians currently held in Israeli jails. Every 10 additional hostages subsequently released will extend the pause by a day. However, the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, has vowed Israel will continue its war against Hamas after the pause. The Palestinian President, Mahmoud Abbas, has welcomed the temporary truce in fighting and has reiterated calls for wider solutions to the conflict. Other world leaders have also praised the deal. The US President Joe Biden says it should see further American hostages freed. The European Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen, has promised the bloc will do its utmost to use the time for a humanitarian surge into Gaza. Meanwhile, in Russia, a spokesperson for the Foreign Ministry said Moscow also welcomes the humanitarian pause. The hometown of 4 teenage boys who died in North Wales has cancelled tonight's switching on of the Christmas lights out of respect for the families. Jevon Hurst, Harvey Owen, Wilf Fitchett and Hugo Morris had set off on a camping trip in the Snowdonia area. Their bodies were recovered yesterday when a car was found overturned and partially submerged in water. North Wales Police is investigating how the car left the road. The force says it appears to have been a tragic accident. Shrewsbury Town Council have called it a terrible tragedy. Tax cuts, investment in the energy sector and getting people back into work are amongst the measures expected to be announced by the Chancellor very shortly. Jeremy Hunt's autumn budget statement will pitch Britain's economy as being back on track as he seeks to ease the tax burden from a 70-year high. Chair of the Commons Treasury Committee, Harriet Baldwin, says it's all about getting Britain moving.
Well, I think it is going to be a real turning point today in terms of the autumn statement, because if you cast your mind back to a year ago, inflation was running over 11%. Now we've got a backdrop of it having fallen to 4.6%, and the Bank of England forecasting that it'll fall further next year. And so that's a backdrop where Jeremy Hunt, who had to raise taxes last year, can look actually at giving some of that back to the hard-working people of the UK.
Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Darren Jones, though, says today's announcement won't be enough to turn Britain's economic tide.
On every measure on the economic dashboard for our country, whether inflation and the cost of living, the amount of tax people are paying, the amount of debt the country's in, the quality of our public services, and whether people at home feel better off after the last 13 years under the Tories or not, it's just red lights across the dashboard. It's 13 years of failure, and the budget today is not going to be able to do anywhere near enough to turn that around.
Pro-Palestinian activists have scaled a building in Manchester. Palestine Action posted a video on social media showing one of its demonstrators climbing onto the roof of the offices of Fisher German, a property management firm. They say support is building on the ground whilst the action stays on the roof of the building. The group said it's targeting the company due to its business dealings with weapons manufacturers. 4 men will be sentenced soon for the murder of a 28-year-old woman in Liverpool. Ashley Dale was killed when James Witham forced his way into her home and opened fire with a machine gun. He and co-defendants Joseph Pears, Niall Barry and Sean Zeiss were found guilty of murder and conspiracy to murder Ms Dale's partner. Witham told the jury he believed the house was empty at the time and he intended to send a warning to Ms Dale's partner, who he'd claimed was stealing drug customers. The co-founder of the tech company OpenAI has returned as chief exec just days after being ousted in a bizarre U-turn. Sam Altman's sacking was announced on Friday amid much mystery, with the board saying he hadn't been consistently candid with them. His departure prompted 500 staff to threaten to resign. He quickly accepted a new position with Microsoft, which has a partnership with OpenAI, but he will now return to his previous role as part of an agreement in principle. And around a third of British people have admitted to working in their pyjamas. A survey from Indeed found around 33% of workers do wear their pyjamas during shift hours. Employees dress in their nightwear 46 days a year on average, with 1 in 12 wearing pyjamas every day. Almost half of the bosses surveyed said their staff have just become too casual since the pandemic, which they blame on too much working from home. Not sure what's under the desk, though, do you? This is GB News. We're on TV, digital radio and on your smart speaker too. Now it's back to Andrew and Bev.
Good morning. It's 11:06. We are going to be talking about what you've been saying at home right now. It's a very busy news day today. I like these days.
Yeah.
And there's not just one big story in town. There's tons of stories that we're talking about. Oh, and we have to thank you.
Yeah, we do.
We have to thank our viewers at home.
And listeners.
And our listeners, because you have been tuning in your droves in the last couple of weeks in particular. We're so grateful. Thank you so much. We're such a little station. We're just a start-up.
Yeah.
We punch beyond our means, you might say.
Yeah, and we are punching our rivals.
And potentially each other sometimes, and that might be why they quite like us.
Exactly.
But anyway, we love the fact that you've been tuning in, so thank you. And if you do like what we do, just tell at least one mate today. Tell one of your friends.
And stay with us.
and stay with us. Now, look at what you've been saying at home. Richard, now, this is, of course, the fact that there's going to be a clampdown on disability benefits.
Is there?
Well, it depends what you mean by a clampdown, doesn't it? The government is saying they're going to make it much harder to stay on benefits and not be seeking a job.
That's what they're going to say.
But Richard
We'll
said,
see.
I have a broken back, my spine is held together by titanium bolts and pins. Let's see how much grief I get after this budget. I get it every time, and every time I have to beg them. I'm not fit to do anything. And this is... sorry to hear that, Richard. It sounds...
Of course, because there are many, many genuine people on benefits. Of course there are. But there are some, I'm afraid, who are swinging the lead. They are taking the Michael. And we know through work done by the CSJ, Centre for Social Justice, some families have been out on benefits for generations.
Yeah, and it has become a culture for some people. Not many. There are people who are really struggling, especially at the moment with interest rates. I think we're going to see much more of it into the winter and spring of next year, with people struggling to pay their mortgages, because the mortgage is the last thing that you stop paying, isn't it? You do everything just to try and keep the roof over your head, or your rent, of course. Let's see what else you have been saying at home. I'm struggling to get my emails up at the moment.
Well, let's move on then, because the Chancellor is going to set out that autumn statement. It's basically plans for tax and spending, but by about 12:30. National insurance, we think, will be cut. There'll be other changes. We're going to talk to the Tory MP for Uxbridge and South Ruislip, Steve Tuckwell. Steve, morning to you. You are a new MP, of course, because you were the surprise winner of that by-election in Uxbridge and South Ruislip, because the Tories turned it into a referendum on Sadiq Khan's hated ultra-low emission zone expansion. What you were with the Chancellor, we've seen a photograph of you with the Chancellor just the other day in his office. So what are you hoping he's going to do for your constituents?
Well, it's great to be on here this morning. As you say, a few months ago I wouldn't have expected to be stood here, but it's going to be my first autumn statement, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what the Chancellor has got to say. There's been lots of speculation about what isn't going to be included and what isn't going to be included, and I'm really looking forward to understanding what the fine detail is, so I can take that back to my constituents, which is an area that I'm championing local businesses and supporting our high street. So I wouldn't want to really speculate on what the fine detail is going to look like, but I'm really looking forward to understanding what's going to be announced in about the next hour and a half.
Tax cuts for businesses in 50 years, Steve.
Well, again, there's a lot of speculation about tax cuts and business rates, and again, it would be wrong of me to kind of second-guess what is going to be included in the fine detail. So I'm really looking forward to understanding what that looks like for my constituency and about how it can benefit businesses in Uxbridge and South Ruislip.
You stepped into the very big shoes of Boris Johnson in Uxbridge and South Ruislip, Steve. How are you finding the job?
I'm immensely enjoying it. It's an area where I was born and raised. I've spent my entire life. I started my working career as a postman in Uxbridge, and I'm really looking forward to representing the people, my friends, my neighbours, people all around me as their Member of Parliament. So the last few months has been an incredible privilege for me. As I said, I didn't expect to be stood here talking to yourselves on the day of an autumn statement, but again, I'm really looking forward to hearing what the benefits are going to be included in that autumn statement, so I can go back to the doorsteps of Uxbridge and South Ruislip, the many, many hundreds of businesses I've been talking to since I've been elected as an MP, and understanding how I can support them as local businesses and really supporting our high streets as well.
What did you make, Steve, of this draft leak report from the Advertising Standards Authority suggesting that Sadiq Khan may have exaggerated the benefits of the ultra-low emission zone on our health and on our breathing? And if that's the case, he's effectively lied to the voters.
Well, I've been saying right the way through the by-election campaign, 41 days gruelling by-election campaign, and since, being elected at the back end of July, the immense frustration, anger and anxiety that ULEZ is continuing to cause on the doorsteps of Outer London, and in particular my constituency, is still there. So we need to be making sure that we keep the focus on the abysmal ULEZ expansion that's been imposed upon us, and we need to be taking that message through to the mayoral election. As I said on the media last week, a lot of Labour MPs are calling for an early general election. Let's call for an early mayoral election so that we can see what Londoners really think about their Mayor Sadiq Khan.
Interested interesting, Steve, hearing you say you didn't expect to be standing here. A lot of MPs will, you know, style it out whether they're being genuine or not, that they fully expected to win that seat, and history proved them to be the right person for the job. You did win that seat on the motorist ticket, didn't you? But are you a bit frustrated that the Conservative Party itself isn't being a little more supportive of the motorist? Thinking particularly about this autumn statement today, and there's nothing in there for fuel duty.
Well, we'll see what the autumn statement says about the impact it has on motorists. But, you know, my by-election victory was unexpected. You know, I was behind in the polls. The Conservatives are behind in the national polls. It just goes to show that when we campaign on matters of substance, you know, people do turn to the Conservative Party as they know that they will be delivering on their behalf. And again, the by-election in Uxbridge was central to you, Les, but there was a lot of local issues as well, such as, you know, making sure that the hospital was rebuilt and that Sadiq Khan doesn't close our police station. So there was a lot of local issues that were included in that as well.
Are you going to win at the general election, though, Steve?
I think there's going to be an incredible amount of hard work over the next, well, between now and whenever the general election is called. So there's going to be an incredible amount of hard work, but myself and my Conservative MP colleagues will be working incredibly hard, you know, building on the outputs of today's autumn statement to ensure that we can, you know, campaign on matters of substance which the British public will turn to.
When do you want the election to be?
Well, that's not a matter for me.
Come on, Steve, you must have a preference.
I'm talking to businesses. I don't actually. I think, you know, obviously we've got until January 2025 is when the absolute drop-dead date for the election can be, and it's really up to the Prime Minister and his Cabinet to decide when the timing would be right for that.
OK.
All right, that's Steve
Very diplomatic.
Tory MP for Uxbridge South Wright. Thanks for joining us. What a great bloke. Nice to think he started off, he was a postman in his constituency.
Brilliant, isn't it? I love seeing people like that in politics.
Alan Johnson, who went on to be Labour's Home Secretary and could have been a great Labour leader, he was a postman.
Is that right?
Yeah, started off as a postman, but then rose through the ranks and became a leader of the Postal Union. He used to deliver letters to checkers.
The stuff you know, Andrew Pearce, honestly. Yep. Right, we're joined in the studio by household finance expert Greg Marsh now. Morning, Greg. Good to see you. We're just trying to explain to our viewers, really, what might this autumn statement today mean for them, mean for all of us. Can you give us a few details?
We're speculating, aren't we? We don't exactly know what we're going to get.
We kind of know.
We kind of know, because I think you know, the Prime Minister's been under a lot of pressure to show some real evidence that these economic improvements that we've been talking about have begun to show through, and people are going to feel them. The context really matters. So over the last 6 years, what's been happening quietly has been stealth taxation.
Yeah.
So over the last 6 years, there's been an equivalent, can you get your head around this, and a 6p rise in income tax.
Shocking.
Why? Because of this thing called fiscal drag. It means because the tax thresholds have remained constant with inflation rising, it means that the average wages have increased, which means that we're all paying a bit more tax, even though the tax numbers haven't changed. The actual amount that we're paying as a proportion of our salary has increased a lot.
For everybody, regardless of what tax bracket you're in?
It does vary on tax bracket, clearly. So people who've been below the tax threshold have been less affected by this. But for a typical working family, you know, someone on a household income, let's say, of an individual income of 27,000, very typical income for someone in the UK. Now, the giveaway that's been well trailed today is 1p on national insurance. Right? That's a big deal in other contexts. But in this context, actually, if the tax thresholds don't move today, and we've no indication that they will, but if they don't, that 1p that the Chancellor might give back on the pound, that's about £130 a year equivalent for someone on that £27,000 income level, actually, the Chancellor's taking away, because the stealth tax is 2p. So 130 into your pocket, which you weren't expecting, that's the good news, 230 odd out. So again, it's a little bit of there's a little bit of footwork going on here, and the reason this matters is that while there are various groups who have been fairly protected from the rising cost of living over the last few years, I mean, people on fixed income, for instance, pensioners, the triple lock and so on, have been quite protected. Even those on the very lowest incomes, actually, the minimum wage incomes, have increased in line with inflation. Working families have paid a much higher cost, and it's working families in particular who, of course, the Conservative government needs to impress at the ballot box in the next election, and because they've borne the brunt of the cost of living crisis, I think all eyes are really on whether this giveaway, this give back, might win the headlines this afternoon or this evening, but will it actually win in people's pockets over Christmas.
It must be so galling if you are a part of that working family, 27,000, 30,000, not a huge amount of money, Steve, to know that the benefits are going to go up by 6.7%. They're going to uprate with the inflation figure from a month ago, and those families' wages are not going to go up 6.7%. And if they do, the thresholds don't change, they're going to be worse off again.
Yes, I mean, the issue isn't necessarily that wage increases for working families haven't broadly kept pace with inflation. Just in the last couple of months, we've finally crossed this.
But that's very recent.
Very recently crossed this threshold where an average household's average workers' wages have increased just a little bit faster than prices are rising. So maybe that's a bit better now over the next 12 months. But to make up for the challenges over the last 12 months, and again, let's put a fine point on this, over the Christmas season. Right, we've turned our heating back on, or most families have now turned their heating back on. So we now see this, right? We start to see people's energy bills rising again. Now, notionally, on paper, energy bills should be lower this Christmas for most families. Certainly, the price cap has come down. The headline cost of energy has fallen. However, this time last year, there was £400 on the table for every family from the Chancellor as a giveaway to try to help people deal with the living costs over that expensive winter period where heating and lighting your home was hard. Energy prices are about to rise a bit. We're expecting to get the new price cap data in the next couple of days. And again, we're expecting to see prices go up a bit for energy. Net off that £400, and actually, a typical household is not going to have any less outgoings around energy bills this Christmas than they did last Christmas. So that working family has had a brutal 12-month period. They've not seen their wages keep pace with inflation until now. Things like energy is not going to be cheaper this Christmas than it was last year. And even with a 1p give back, they are still paying more in effective rates of tax than they were.
And what if we have a cold winter too?
If we have a cold winter,
that's good. Then they really are going to be seriously out of pocket.
It's particularly tough for working families, but it's even tougher for the several million households who are in energy poverty. That means effectively, energy poverty means that by the time you've paid your energy bills and nothing else, you're already below the poverty line. There are several million households now in that situation, and many of them have got to this point in 2023 having not been able to pay back their debts, credit card bills or other costs from last winter still. So again, we're going into Christmas this year. Households are facing very significant challenges in the future. Many haven't cleared the debts from the last 12, 18 months. So this is a very tough time for households in the UK. What we've seen across the board from our users at Nous is we've seen people who really aren't able to keep pace and are struggling to see where they can make ends meet. There are ways to save money. I can't resist mentioning that. Go to our website, nous.co. But generally speaking, there's no silver bullets. I wish we had more of them.
What is your website address?
nous.co. Save money on your household bills.
Brilliant. Greg Marsh, thank you so much. Brilliantly explained.
Yeah, really good.
Right, still to come this morning, the Chancellor says that he will not put up levies on beer, wines and spirits. We're going to be talking to one very annoyed landlord next, Adam Brooks. He said that's no help. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
11:24, you're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Now, very soon, Jeremy Hunt will announce a freeze on alcohol duty. The Chancellor will not put up levies on beer, wines and spirits.
So should we be celebrating? Well, let's ask somebody who knows all about this. Pub owner and landlord Adam Brooks, who, of course, is well known to GB viewers and listeners. Adam, are you doing cartwheels at the prospect of a freeze on alcohol duty?
Definitely not. Like, even if I read your headline there, it says Chancellor to freeze duty on alcohol in a bid to boost pubs. How is not punishing us further a boost? A cut is a boost. I got very annoyed in August when they was doing all the PR and celebrating in pubs, MPs pulling pints and things saying that they'd helped us out. But they put the duty up on wine and spirits by quite a lot by restructuring the way they worked it out. I mean, that costs us a good few £100 a week. And again, now we've got no help. Pubs are closing sort of so often now. I think insolvencies are up by 66% year on year for pubs. We've got the third highest alcohol duty in Europe. It's 10 times what Germany's is. We need a massive cut, a massive rethink on this. So, how can I celebrate something that's going to cost us money down the line? That they're putting the wages up. Where do we find that extra money? We're already struggling in the pubs. This is no boost, and I hate the way that they try and spin this as great news. Great news. Let's celebrate. You're not going to hurt us even more. It's rubbish.
What about your energy bills at the moment in the pub, Adam? How are they looking this winter?
Look, thankfully, I'm coming to the end of a really hard year or so that I've had with electric. I mean, I've been paying sort of £5,000 a month electric in a really small backstreet pub. So it's huge. I mean, my contract changes soon. I renegotiated now, so that's coming down to about £3,000 per month. But people don't realise my utilities and my energy bills come to about £75,000 a year at this small pub. Then I've got sort of £75,000, £80,000 a year rent. We know the business. I've been doing this 20 years. I grew up in pubs as well, but it's the hardest it's ever been. And the only way that pubs will survive and hospitality will survive is if they do some sort of VAT rate like what the Europeans do. a lot of European countries have a VAT rate at around 10%, 12%, to encourage people to go out, to keep prices down. But this Chancellor and this PM, they seem so interested in big business. They do not understand small business. And, you know, a VAT cut would help cash flow for many struggling pubs and hospitality businesses, and it would bring down the price of many products. I cannot see how they don't see this. And I've spoke to many MPs that said they have put this point to government, and it falls on deaf ears.
Adam, do you think that there's an issue here? You look at Jeremy Hunt, you do not exactly imagine him having a pint at the bar of your pub. He's not a pub type, is he? And Rishi Sunak, of course, is famously teetotal.
But he's definitely not. I mean, I was horrified. This is not new news. You know, I was horrified that Jeremy Hunt became Chancellor. This is the guy that wanted people locked up and removed from their houses during COVID. You know, the guy really doesn't think on the level of any of us. I really cannot get my head around why he was made Chancellor. But again, it's all big business. They do not understand small business. We need people within government that understand the struggles of the small businessman. You know, and the costs. They cannot keep. You know, we're paying for the higher wages. This doesn't come from government. Yeah. They're gonna get more money in tax. You know, this is a win-win from them. But who pays these higher wages now? It's us. Where do I get that money from? Oh, I've got to put my prices up. So, you know, it's like a death spiral for the pub. The price is just going to keep going up and up, and it's the government's fault.
Do you see anything better from Labour, Adam, as you look down towards the next 12 months? They're not talking the language of the small business owner for you?
No, I mean, Labour scares the living daylights out of me, I've got to say. You know, some of their views and things, it really... We're stuck between two really bad parties at the moment. So, I mean, certainly neither of them are getting my vote at the next election unless something drastically changes. But one thing I've just got to keep reiterating, and the top hospitality bosses and the names in hospitality keep saying, cut that or we're in trouble. I've been saying this for, I think, 2.5 years, you know, and I was laughed at the start, but now it's grown traction within hospitality that we need a VAT rate sort of comparable with those in Europe, because lower prices, you know, it helps cash flow. It's the only way that they can help us. The business rates need to stay low. And I mean, many people don't realise that pubs pay huge business rates as well. So it's been quite an unfair system for pubs over the years, business rates. But if they can keep them low, cut that, and stop adding things like wage rises and that on us without helping us, then we might get through. But all I'm hearing from my WhatsApp chats, publicans, restaurateurs, is that they've got to try and survive through Christmas and hope that January, February isn't too bad.
When you're working in the pub and you're talking to normal people, Adam, that sense of political disenfranchisement or just sort of politically homelessness that you've just described, is that very typical?
Yeah, certainly in my area. You know, my area is traditionally a Conservative voting area. We've got Eleanor Lang as our MP. Not that I've ever seen her or had help from her or had dialogue with her, but you know, politics for me, all the trust has gone out of politics. I don't trust anything I see anymore, you know, and I go back to that August alcohol duty sort of PR campaign that they did saying, we're helping the pubs, we're doing this. I actually had a bit of an argument with a sitting MP saying, you're talking rubbish. You know, you've just added a few £100 a week to my bills. And he almost said, no, that's impossible. I said, go back and research and have a look at what you've just done, and spirits and wines are going to go up. You're not helping me at all, but you're celebrating it like it's a cut, it's a boost. Like this, you know, all the headlines are boost for pubs. You know, not taxing us more is not a boost.
Right.
You can't celebrate not doing something. I just think it's so wrong, so wrong.
It is. Adam, thank you, as always. I'd like to see Adam Brooks in the boxing ring with some of these MPs. He's been doing quite a lot of amateur boxing recently.
Adam's right. The alcohol duty went up on August the 1st, sharply, and they said it was because of health. So, on stronger wine, stronger beer, and they said it's all about your health. No, it was all about getting more money in the bank. And what are they doing with it? That's the point. We seeing any benefits?
It's the fabric of our society. Pubs, socialising, hospitality.
Bet Adam's pub is a cracker.
I bet it's a cracker. Right, up next, it's your morning's news with Aaron Armstrong.
Good morning to you. It's 11:32 here in the GB Newsroom. The Foreign Secretary says the truce between Israel and Hamas is a crucial step towards releasing hostages and providing humanitarian relief in Gaza. The two sides have agreed a 4-day pause, which is due to start in the next 24 hours. 50 hostages held by the terror group in Gaza will be freed in exchange for 150 Palestinians held in Israeli jails. Every additional 10 hostages subsequently released will extend the pause by a day. Israel's Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, though, says despite the agreement, his country remains at war. A Shropshire community is mourning the loss of 4 teenage boys who died in North Wales. Jevon Hurst, Harvey Owen, Wilf Fitchett and Hugo Morris had set off on a camping trip in the Snowdonia area. Their bodies were recovered yesterday after a car was found overturned and partially submerged in water. Tax cuts and getting people back into work are amongst the measures expected to be announced by the Chancellor shortly. Jeremy Hunt's autumn statement will pitch Britain's economy as being back on track. He is seeking to ease the tax burden from a 70-year high. Confusion surrounding the term herd immunity in the early days of the pandemic, according to England's chief medical officer, existed. Professor Sir Chris Whitty told the COVID inquiry this morning, debate over the issue was a clearly ridiculous goal of policy, which he described as very dangerous. More on all of our stories are available right now on our website, gbnews.com.
For exclusive, limited edition and rare gold coins that are always newsworthy, Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Quick look at the markets today. The pound buys you $1.2532, €1.1493 euros. The price of gold, £1,597.90 per ounce. The FTSE 100 is at 7,480 points.
Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Well, it's happening today. Jeremy Hunt is set to deliver his autumn statement at 12:30. Our reporter Jeff Moody is at a winter market to see what announcements are on their Christmas wish list. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life:
your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Acquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's on your teeth.
It's on your teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
11:38 with Britain's Newsroom and GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, and we're talking about that autumn statement. It's now barely 45 minutes away. What are the public across the UK hoping to hear?
So let's go to speak to Jeff Moody in Birmingham and Jack Carson in Exeter. Jeff, you're at a Christmas market. I love a Christmas market. Oh no, apparently Jeff's not quite ready. Jack Carson in Exeter. How are the people in Exeter feeling this morning about this incoming autumn statement?
It's in Birmingham.
Well, we're a little bit more north than Exeter over in Birmingham this morning at Elevate Property Group. Of course, this property developer has over 30 years experience, not here in the city, but also around the country as well, of course, constructing those properties as well as then obviously selling them off, both residentially and also commercially as well. We're joined by Mike Diskin, who's the Group Finance Director. I mean, Mike, ahead of this autumn statement today by the Chancellor, I mean, he's saying the economy seems to be in a better shape. Would you agree with what he's saying there?
We've certainly seen improvements of late. The stabilisation of interest rates has helped and inflation has fallen, so that's got to be a good thing. So, yeah, we're definitely in much better shape than we were.
I mean, obviously, the construction industry particularly has had, that issue with inflation, particularly around supplies. I guess it's for you as a business, what's been the impact, particularly on costs and actually being able to, develop these properties, build these properties to sell on?
Well, raw materials for the contractors has increased significantly in the last 18 months, so that they try and pass those costs on to us. So that puts pressure on margins. It makes developments less attractive to do. And obviously everyone knows we need to build as many homes as we can. So inflation negatively impacts on that.
I mean, how confident are you that if the Chancellor does announce that, these cuts to taxes, that they're not going to be inflationary, that it is the right time and that we're not going to kind of see repeats of maybe what we've seen over the past year?
I don't think the tax cuts will be inflationary. I think what drove the inflation in the last 18 months was, one, an increase in the money supply, and also the problems in Ukraine, the pressure on utility costs, that fed its way through the supply chain. So I don't think the tax cuts will be inflationary.
I mean, obviously, particularly here in Birmingham, it's the youngest city in Europe. That helping those first-time buyers get on the market, I guess, is a big thing for you as a business. What could the Chancellor do today or announce today that might kind of give you a bit more confidence that you can reach that market?
Something to encourage first-time buyers back into the marketplace. Interest costs have maybe put them off in the last 12 months. Something like the Help to Buy scheme that used to be in place, where there was some support for them to acquire their first property. That would be great for us as a business.
I mean, obviously, we know, of reports of housing problems across the country and not building enough houses. We know that is a problem. There are possible planning reforms that the Chancellor might announce in this statement today. What would be the impact of those reforms kind of on your business in terms of being able to, develop more properties?
Well, planning, any simplification of the planning laws would be great for us. Quite often we're tied up in planning on sites for up to 2 years. That's delaying the process of us actually building the properties and getting the homes to market. So simplification of the planning laws would probably be the best thing they could do for our industry at the moment.
I mean, obviously, we know that there have been rises to corporation tax in the past as well. well. There's no indication that that is going to change, and there's going to be no announcement on that. Is that a bit of an oversight?
It would be good to see some change on corporation tax. You know, the rise from 19% to 25% is significant for anybody. So if they were able to include that in some of the tax breaks for business, encourages business to work harder, make more money, generate more jobs, help grow the economy, that's going to be a good thing.
All right, Mike, thank you so much for joining us before this statement a little bit later on this afternoon.
Thank you.
That was Jack Carson in Birmingham. We're going to go to Jeff Moody now, who is at a festive fair in Exeter. Jeff, morning.
Good morning to you. Well, there's around 100 stores here, so I'm already shopping like there's no tomorrow. People are certainly turning out in droves, so the cost of living crisis doesn't seem to have prevented people from coming along to buy things. Here's Emma's soap. It says on the thing it's so much more than a bar of soap. Let's see what that means. Hello to you, Emma.
Hello.
In what way is your soap more than a bar of soap?
It's its ethos. It's ecological, natural, sustainable, zero waste, plastic free.
And has there been a good market for that over the last year? How's trade been?
Trade's been good over the last decade as I built up the business, but the last year has been interesting. Globally, there's been a lot of conflict, and that has affected the cost of materials.
Because I suppose the main material for you is oil, isn't it?
Oils and butters, oils and butters, and if they go through the roof in price, then your product, your selling price will increase.
So what has that meant for you then?
I scaled down production over the summer and waited for the oils to drop in price. There's no point making a bar of soap and then selling it at £7.
So you actually found that you had to scale back your business because
Yes.
you just couldn't continue when oil prices were so high?
Yeah.
So what are you looking forward to hearing, or what would you like to hear in an ideal world this afternoon from the
What I would
Chancellor?
like to hear would be environmental. I would like there to be environmental taxes for those who ignore the problems that we're having, waste, for example. I would like there to be environmental incentives for those of us who are actually doing something positive, but there aren't. There's the good. I think he's bringing something out about investment, where if you invest in your business, you can offset the taxes in 1 year rather than scaling it over a period of time.
And that would help you, would it?
That would help, certainly if you're going to change a vehicle, because you could offset the cost all in 1 year, and it would help if you're refurbishing or moving manufacturing premises or an office or something.
What about national insurance? They're saying that could go down. Would that help you? Do you have staff?
National insurance, no, that wouldn't help. It wouldn't help me personally. I think we need to pay a fair amount of national insurance because I feel that we need the NHS and all the other services that come under that umbrella. But I'm not happy about the freeze on personal allowance. Inflation, which means the cost of items have gone up. So if you sell exactly the same amount of items that you did last year, it will be 10% more sales. And your personal allowance hasn't gone up, so therefore you're getting taxed higher. So the poor are getting taxed and the rich are getting richer.
Okay, thank you very much. Same old story. Thank you very much
Okay,
indeed for that,
thank
Emma.
you.
Greatly appreciated. I'll come back and I'll buy some soap. But in the meantime, we're here talking to all the store holders and customers. So if you are in Exeter, come down and tell us what you think.
OK, Stephen Pound and Emma Webb will be back. We're building up to PMQs and the autumn statement. First, though, your very important weather forecast.
Good afternoon. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update with me, Annie, from the Met Office. Tonight will be a milder night than last night for most of us, but apart from in the far north where it will turn chillier as this cold front starts to sink southwards, introducing much colder air from the north. But we've got that milder air in charge through the rest of the day, so quite a lot of cloud around, some rain and drizzle starting to fall over the hills of Wales as well as northern areas of England and much of Scotland too. Northern Ireland also seeing some spits and spots of rain and drizzle through this evening, but the bulk of the rain will be restricted to northwestern Scotland. As I said, a milder night, so temperatures not falling much below double digits in towns and cities, but that colder air is starting to show its face across the far north of Scotland. That colder feel will become more widespread across Scotland slowly throughout the day, so temperatures tending to fall through the day here. A different story though further south, to the south of this weather front, we'll see a similar day to today. Plenty of cloud around for most areas, areas. Some sunshine by the afternoon and not feeling too bad in any of that sunshine. The weather front, though, then does start to sink southwards as we head into Friday. So most of us seeing that colder air by Friday morning, are likely to see a bit more of a frost out there on Friday morning. The far southwest holding on to a little bit more cloud, though, for much of the day. Through the weekend, we'll see that colder feel across the board, though there'll still be plenty of sunshine around to enjoy.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with Newsroom.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affects us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Got a pulse.
Right, we are back with you. Good afternoon. We are about 9 minutes away from PMQs. We're going to be taking that live. You see who's in the studio, and you'll know why chaos has ensued. It is Stephen Pound and Emma Webb, of course.
The former Labour MP, Stephen Pound.
Good afternoon, you two troublemakers. We are looking forward to PMQs. It's going to be a little bit different today, Stephen, of course, because we've got the autumn statement in there as well. So does that make a bit of a sort of mockery of the PMQs bit, because everyone's just waiting for for the statement.
Well, yes and no. I mean, the real problem is Northern Ireland questions, which we've just had, and so everybody takes Northern Ireland very, very seriously, yet nobody's even noticed it. But it's interesting, because quite clearly this is like the overture towards the big symphony. And I think the SNP have got the first question this afternoon. Kirsten Osborne is going to be asking the first question. And so it'll be very interesting to see what line they take. However, I can make one prophecy. I'm absolutely convinced that every single Chancellor of the Exchequer wants to produce a rabbit.
Yes.
I bet you that they'll do something for the motorist. They'll do something that could actually say that we're actually supporting and helping the motorists.
They'll
come up with, just like Gordon
That
Brown
would be too sensible, Stephen. That would be too much of a vote winner.
The trouble is, you people who've got no time for the Conservative Party, people like me on the Democratic left, we quite like a bit of opposition once in a while.
When you're 20 points behind in the polls, you should be bold.
Yes.
Indeed, yeah.
You've got nothing left.
Yeah, they've got nothing to lose.
Nothing to lose.
It's going to be very difficult for them to turn it round now, so they might as well go
be
for
bold,
it.
be radical.
Well, Gordon Brown cut taxes on whiskey and put them up on cigarettes.
Yeah.
He lost.
He did.
Emma, do you think, though, how does this land with the voters today and also tomorrow? Because we were hearing earlier from our consumer expert about the fact that if you're on, I think, £27,000 a year, you might find yourself £130 a year better off with the 1p off tax, but actually off national insurance. But you're going to be paying £230 in stealth taxes that we just sort of end up paying, we don't really know.
Yeah, it's amazing how many people are getting seriously stealth taxed and don't even realise it. I like Liam Hallager's suggestion of raising the threshold at which you start to pay tax, because that just is, I mean, it makes so much sense. Why wouldn't you do that? Because then you're not paying all of that money in universal credit to people who are in part-time work.
And that's Richard Tice's the reforms policy, that it would be you'd have to earn £20,000.
Yeah, he'd raise it all the way.
It makes a lot of sense, I think.
Yeah.
I think that, frankly, at this stage, they should just go for it. Hell for leather. The sensible thing for them to do would be to prioritise motorists, businesses. There are so many things that they could do that would be vote winners, particularly in those safe seats, but also in the old red wall that became the blue wall. Do I think they're going to? I mean,
if they do something radical, they could then put clear blue water with the Labour Party, challenge Labour to vote against whatever this great idea is.
There's so many things that they could have done, from fracking to... But no, I mean, what Emma said, I have to say, a shiver ran down my spine when I heard her talking about that. It's like, we brought back Cameron. Are we now going to bring back Truss? I mean, is this when you talk about really going hell for leather? Because, believe you me, that was...
Well, I'd rather her come back than George Osborne, frankly.
Yeah.
Well, that's a considered argument on econometric grounds rather than a personal dislike, I hope.
Yeah. Let's see what some of our viewers have been saying at home about this statement. Emma, James has said, cut to MPs' wages before benefits. The whole country will support a cut to these parasites' wages.
We do need to have politicians, and you do need to attract people to the role. MPs are actually, in the grand scheme of things, not paid that much.
Yeah. Particularly compared to European counterparts.
Yeah, compared to
beyond.
what they could be getting in the private sector for less responsibility.
Was that marvellous thing? When they set the wages for MEPs, they decided to set it at the level of the highest amount of parliamentary expenses. Greece immediately put up their salaries for MPs, and everybody was then paid at the Greek level.
Yeah,
Greece went bankrupt.
Greece did go bankrupt. You're
also,
right.
one of the ways in which they could very easily cut taxes would be to focus on green levies, wouldn't it? But they won't do that.
No,
well, that'd be really popular.
Really
popular, and that would be really opposed. And that would be opposed by Labour.
Yeah,
it'd be a penny off tax. I'm pretty sure about that.
Paul has got in touch and he said, like many Conservative voters, I've lost faith in the current administration. What would renew my faith, says Paul? In brief, a fiscally responsible budget with a current national debt in excess of 2.5 trillion. It is wholly inappropriate to cut taxes. Clearly, the country is living beyond its means and has been for some time. Expecting future generations to pick up the cost of our excesses is shameful and embarrassing. Emma, do we have a problem with people living beyond their means? It's normally the young people like you who spend too much money on Deliveroo and avocados,
I feel
isn't
attacked.
Who get accused of sort of living kind of profligately and not really, saving for anything, and then complaining that the government aren't giving you enough money.
Yeah, no, an addiction to Gales can be more expensive than an addiction to hard drugs. So,
Gales a coffee shop.
Other bases are available.
Yeah. Big fan of Gales. Big fan of Gales. I think that the problem with this government is that, as for a Conservative government, they have been so hard on business. And I think that's, for me, that is the obvious thing that they should be focusing on, is actually rewarding people for being independent, for taking responsibility, and for being creative, because that's what's going to create a better economy. And I think the problem is that they have disincentivised people from doing that. And young people in particular, yes, it's true, across the world, we are a debt society. But young people in particular, to have hope for the future, need to be incentivised to start their own businesses,
Emma,
to take personal
you started your own business, didn't you?
Just a minute, guys. There's only sort of one person, really, that would get the popcorn out for a day like today. That's Tom Harwood. Emily Carver has to sit with him for the next 3 hours.
Is it peanuts or popcorn?
Just about to ask our resident political geek why he's got the popcorn out.
Well, I would hope that families across the country have got the popcorn out for today's double bill in Parliament. Not just the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, but also Jeremy Hunt and Rachel Reeves. I can't think of anything more exciting than what we're going to see for the next, potentially, hour on our screens. But no, absolutely, popcorn out, and perhaps even we should get out some Prosecco, if there are going to be tax cuts, that is.
Well, that's the thing. Crucially, what does it mean for you at home? We'll find out.
Sweet or sour popcorn?
Now you're talking my language, yeah. Sweet or salty on a day like today?
Sweet or salty?
Is it going to be sweet or salty, this autumn statement, Stephen?
Well, the golden rule of autumn statements and budgets is if they look good on the day, they look bad in the morning.
Yeah, they unravel within 48 hours.
Do you remember Cornish pasty tax?
I do. Caravan tax. I do.
God, we must be the only people here.
2012. It was 2012. George Osborne
shot the Tory party in the foot.
It certainly did.
And what about? Let's just talk about Jeremy Hunt's delivery a little bit, Emma, before we see this. He doesn't have the charisma or the warmth to get these messages across, even if it's good news.
I actually saw. I mean, I agree, but I did see him give a pretty good speech at the Spectator Awards one year. He does have it in him, but he's not particularly charismatic. But is that what you want from a chancellor? I don't think so.
I'd like him to look like he cares about the country, and I think
I think what we want to see is, I think that this country has become unserious, being run by unserious people, and we would like to see some serious people in charge. So charisma is important, yes, not necessarily as important for the Chancellor as it is for the Prime Minister, but we want to see people who are actually thinking things through, moving away from this short-termism, even though, of course, they'll have it in the back of their mind that they're likely to lose the next general election. I think what we want to see is seriousness.
Not seen the signs, long-term thinking, that's been backdrop to all the Prime Minister's speeches. Long-term thinking.
Jeremy Hunt used to have the office immediately above mine in 1 Parliament Street.
Right.
And it's when I discovered that he was a champion lambada dancer who'd been to South America.
No, he's not.
He is.
True as God, for 3 years running, to actually take part in the world...
That can't be true.
Yeah.
He's much more comfortable in China than he is doing the lambada.
You sit there, you tangerine dream, you sit there denying. But, you know, trust me, I used to be a politician.
And, of course, you know, it's a dance that's all about passion.
Careful,
the lambada's all about passion.
So, I have to say, if anyone should be... No, Jeremy Hunt would ace it. I mean,
I think Jeremy Hunt will lose his seat at the next election, and he will be a serious candidate to go in Strictly.
Well, he might lose his seat before the election. Well, he might lose the position of Chancellor, before the election.
Because I think the Tories are determined to get a woman in there to spike the guns of the Labour Party, which want Rachel Reeves to be the first ever woman Chancellor. Yes.
Would they be so mean-spirited and so petty?
Yes, they would.
Do you think they'll bring back Liz Truss?
It won't be her.
No, I don't
Although
think so.
she would like to be Chancellor. I have heard her saying that.
We're counting down. If you're just tuning in now, Emily and Tom will be taking you through with a Good Afternoon Britain, talking you through the autumn statement this afternoon. We've got PMQs, and then we've got Jeremy Hunt's going to be delivering to you what your economic situation, what your financial situation might look like. Although, Stephen, we understand, and again, this will be clarified, that any suggestions that come out today, any policy changes, won't be enacted until the spring.
Well, they can't, because, you know,
And here is
Prime Minister's on his feet.
Yeah. Better than being on anybody else.
On it later, but let me just say we welcome the agreement reached overnight for a humanitarian pause in Gaza. This is something that we have consistently pushed for and is a crucial step towards ending the nightmare for families of those taken hostage in Hamas's terror attack and also addressing the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Justin Oswald.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, his government will say that disabled people have a duty to work from home or lose their benefits, as if a suitable job of this kind is something that can be conjured up at will. It should be obvious to anyone that this kind of punitive policy isn't incentivising work, it's simply punishing disabled people who are already among the most marginalised in our communities. So can the Prime Minister do his duty and tell us now how many of the 137,000 jobs on the DWP Find a Job website